But next, what I'd like to do is move to our panel, and I'm going to let each of our colleagues here introduce themselves, starting with Conrad.
Great. This was an impressive overview. Thanks so much. I'm a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and there I teach machine learning and in particular deep learning. And I also teach causality. And you will see why I think that is so important. Much of my job is about using AI for applications in neuroscience. That's why I sit between the med school and the engineering school. And but recently we've been very much interested in the healthcare space. Specifically, we've been building apps and doing a lot of machine learning for patient understanding. Like, I want to understand their life, everything about their life, because all the signals that we get from patients have something to do with their life. And it also has something to do with their potential diseases. But if we don't understand life, we'll be bad at doing certain things with respect to their diseases. And lastly, I'm very much interested in bringing causality into machine learning. And that's the recent passion of the lab. Why does that matter? Because the business relevant insights that we can have are all about causality. I want to know what makes our customers go away. I don't want to know under which circumstances do they go away, because there's always a backstory to that. There's always confounding. And we are working on new techniques to basically make sense of how things work.
Great. Thank you, Conrad. Mr. Sethi.
Hey, John, can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. Thank you. So good morning, everybody. First and foremost, thank you to Pact for hosting this event, and thank you to Pfizer for sponsoring as well. My name is Nick Sethi. I am currently at Merck. I'm the lead for IT governance, risk, and compliance. I spent a number of years previously at Pfizer, and my last role at Pfizer, where I really drove a lot of the passion from to learn and understand and apply AI, was as the lead for research, development, and medical IT for our Upjohn business unit, and led our artificial intelligence COE along with our real-world evidence capability. And I'm going to echo many of the things that Conrad just said. I mean, what Conrad just summarized were really the opportunities from a healthcare perspective, right? Understanding causality, understanding why patients get a script and then don't fill the script or don't continue to fill the script. We've been, from a healthcare perspective, we've been living in a bubble for a long time of the disease state and the specific patient. And getting beyond the disease state and beyond the patient and really understanding what are all the factors around the patient, and how can we understand those factors and build, whether it's complementary devices or mechanisms by which to drive the right behavior for the right healthcare outcomes. These are incredible opportunities to apply artificial intelligence. And so thank you for allowing me to be here today. It's a great privilege.
Great, thanks, Nick. Thanks for joining. Sanjeev?
Yeah, thanks, John. Good morning to everybody. I'm Sanjeev Sachdeva. I'm the Chief Technology Officer as well as the Global Head Advisory for Life Sciences Unit. As John echoed right at the start of the presentation, so it's a great opportunity, and personally I see it's an inflection point, right? Not for a pharma, not for a medtech, but the whole healthcare ecosystem, right? To leverage this great technologies, right, including AI. To me, it can transform the way the healthcare, right? And the COVID-19 and the events which has happened in last few months is going to accelerate this journey much faster, right? But at the same time, we need to ensure, right, adoption of any technology, right? What happened 10 years back with a mobile phone, right? When you're adopting AI, how we need to be conscious, because at the end of the day, goal of all of us as a stakeholder to ensure that patient safety is in place, right? And that's very, very interesting field, and we are fortunate to be a part of this ecosystem, right? To deliberate and contribute into that journey. With that, thanks, John, for inviting me, and over to you.
Great. All right. Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, everyone. So I'll get into our questions, right? So, the first question, and I'll start at the top with you, Conrad, is, I mean, can you provide some examples how Penn is leveraging AI today, or if not today, how you're planning to in the future? I know you touched on a little bit of it, but can you really help, maybe expand on that?
Yeah, so across UPenn, I think what we are seeing is that across the entire university, AI is becoming central. So some of my appointment is in bioengineering, and it turns out that if you want to understand microscopy images of cell cultures, you need to do AI. And we're collaborating with a lot of people, and all the labs, all the good labs are like building internal capability for that. Radiology is moving all in into using AI to understand the images that we have. It goes all the way into law, where we want to understand how things work, into ethics. Now you can say, under which circumstances am I responsible for something? Well, if I can have causally relate to something, which again goes, it's a computational problem. Now, how can I convince myself that it was my fault that something happened? So I think it's fair to say that at UPenn, and UPenn is massively investing into AI capabilities. And I think it's fair to say that it's starting to be the basis of virtually everything, or at least a component of everything.
Great, excellent. Thanks, Conrad. And to you, Nick, how's Merck? You know, if you can provide some examples in terms of how Merck today is leveraging AI, or maybe planning to in the future.
Yeah, certainly. So I've now been with Merck for I think it's been 86 days was when I checked. So I finally did start to receive a paycheck. Merck, similar to Pfizer, is looking at applying AI in many of the same ways: drive adherence, understand the patient state better, and clearly in drug discovery as well. I think what's really important, stepping back from just one company versus another company and what's happening, is how the industry's evolved. Right, AI started as very much of a new toy, right, and everybody's got to find a reason to apply it. And I think what's starting to happen now, and really needs to happen, right, particularly from leaders and leaders that are on this call, is to find the right business outcomes and then understand what elements of AI would be best applied to attack that problem, right? I think we're coming from a methodology, particularly where IT is so heavily engaged, where we need to build something and then find what to target that something to. I think the world is much different, right? What outcomes are we trying to drive? And then do we have the right people and the right experience and the right business partnership, right, with those that are really at the front edge of leading those outcomes, to say, here's what we have in our toolbox that we know is proven to be successful from an AI machine learning perspective. And here's how we work with great universities like Penn to establish new ways of working in new models that are a bit more, maybe riskier, a bit more advanced in terms of what we have the comfort to do in-house. And how do we bring that together to benefit patients in the right way? Excellent.
All right. And Sanjeev, how's TCS as like one of the world's largest consulting organizations? I'm sure you've got some great examples from a healthcare, what you're seeing from an AI standpoint.
Right. So John, if you look into the broader spectrum, right, AI is changing or impacting every spectrum of every enterprises, right? Whether it's the corporate functions or the way we do. But since the more focus on healthcare, the way I see is changing the overall care continuum, right? From AI perspective, whether it is you start looking into a disease detection, diagnostic, prevention, even from a drug, right? Pharma is a great example, right? How it is getting research, and you have just given the value chain of pharma, right? How it is getting leveraged, but also on the post-treatment. The whole care continuum has multiple interesting use cases, and we are working across. For example, we are using digital therapeutic, right, or digital health. So how you can identify the patterns are some of the risks to the patient, right? Very, very good example of, say, atrial fibrillation, right? Can you detect the issue of a stroke early in advance so that the patient has more time to react, right? It's an absolutely great opportunity to save the life of a patient. How you can identify what Conrad was talking about is how you bring, either from the healthcare perspective or a pharma perspective, how you bring drug first to the market, right? Can you leverage this technology, right? And COVID was a great example, right? How the AI is getting leveraged, right, to improve the diagnostic area. And if you go downstream, right, in the wellness or even in the post-marketing, so you can even improve what you call the indications of what you call the disease progression, which is very impossible given the limited resources what we have in the healthcare ecosystem. And to me, if you ask me personally, the great opportunity of this AI is what I use a term very often called ACE, right? ACE. How it can transform, which is a fundamental to healthcare, how it can improve access, right? Because you can provide an access through AI and digital technology, which was absolutely impossible in this earlier era. Second is how you can improve clinical outcomes, right? Improve the clinical outcome using this AI as a technology. And third is how you improve efficiency, right? And that is what we call ACE. And that's the opportunity we all as an industry, right, to contribute into that. It's a journey, right? We are in a, if I may call so, in the phase one of that journey,
Yeah.
right? But a long way to go, right? In that way to achieve what I spoke about, the outcome of the AI and bigger sense, the digital technologies.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjeev. And that atrial fibrillation example is one that I'm somewhat close to with Pfizer. I think we've been public about our partnership with Fitbit in terms of, leveraging that wearable to help with the detection. Now you have that capability within the watch. That's a great example in terms of digital and health coming together, providing, an AI capability to help with that detection and present what could be a fatal complication, right? So that one's near and dear. All right, starting back at the top, I'll start back to you, Conrad. I mean, what do you see at University of Pennsylvania? Like, what are your biggest challenges when you're trying to leverage like AI and machine learning? You mentioned all kinds of examples in terms of how it's being leveraged across all the departments, even from a legal standpoint. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing?
So I think some of the challenges are related to the industry integration. Like UPenn has a great way of spinning out startups, but it doesn't necessarily have the right incentives to get people to necessarily work on the things that are relevant in industry. Like we need more bridges to industry. And it's hard for a machine learning group like mine to even see what are the biggest pain points in the world that we could solve. Because look, we want to have impact. We want to do the research that really drives things. And so that is one pain point. Another pain point that's arguably on the other side is when I look around, I see lots of machine learning that's like bad machine learning. So you can read the papers and directly point out why this could never be relevant. And it fails on many different points, but a lot of it is there are mechanisms in place that make machine learning look like it's successful early on in the pipeline, when experienced people can know that this is not how success looks like. So if you want, like, that is on the other side where we kind of see bad machine learning done by groups that don't have so much experience with machine learning. But I think this pipeline of prompts and solutions to prompts, that is the biggest obstacle from my perspective.
Yeah, and I can relate to that. I mean, I even think about going back years ago, maybe it's close to 10 years, when it was everybody wanted a mobile app to solve a problem, right? And it was this proliferation of apps, and there were so many apps in the App Store. And so we went through that. And then going back a few years, when we think about AI and the opportunities, everybody felt like there was a need to somehow solve their biggest challenges with AI, right? We just needed an AI-based solution without really a strategy in terms of like how to go about. And so I can definitely relate to what you just shared. Nick, can you talk a little bit about in your 86 days at Merck, what you're seeing from a solutions or biggest challenges?
Yeah, so from a challenges perspective, I'll maybe put the risk and compliance hat on, right? There's a few things that stand out. One, data protection and privacy and being ethical in terms of how we are using your data, your personal data, that we may be hosting or may be hosted by a third party to leverage and learn insights about you, right? I think that's a challenge for any business. I think there are unique and differentiated business models that are now starting to emerge to allow companies like Merck and Pfizer and others to tap into these data sets, but to have a level of protection, not only for themselves, but for the data, for who that data belongs to. The second thing I think that's key is bias, right? And fundamentally, AI starts out with human applied knowledge and learning into an algorithm, into bringing data sets together. And I think particularly the times that we are living in now with some of the social changes that we all need to be very conscious of, it's really critically important to make sure that there's diversity in terms of how we are pulling our AI solutions together, in terms of how we are interrogating our data sets and what biases we are applying. And it fundamentally starts with the talent that we have and the teams that we're bringing together, right? Yeah. At its very core. And if you follow the risk along the chain, right, having a team that is not diverse and having a really brilliant student or scientist or data scientist locked away coming up with the algorithm and not robustly surrounding those folks with the right type of diversity, I think leads to incredible challenges down the line, right? Legal challenges, ethical challenges, compliance challenges. And so these are some of the things that, particularly for big business, I think, but apply to everybody, right? They really apply to everybody in terms of challenges.
Excellent. And Sanjeev, how's from a TCS standpoint, biggest challenge that you're facing when it comes to leveraging AI across TCS?
Yeah, so there are two views to that, John. One is internal IT as a service provider, and second, what we see, right, our customers from a pharma, healthcare value chain. So internally, I would say the challenge was more on what you also relate, right? The mobility example of 10 years back, right? The way it has happened. Earlier, everything was an excitement, right? You take a use case and start developing a technology, right? And an application. And so it solved my problem. But when you look back and see, building a mobile app was not the intent. But when you see you are trying to create so many mobile apps, it was difficult to govern, right? Difficult to manage, security issues, right? And then you take a step back and say, no, I just don't need to provide a mobility app, but I need to provide security, I have an ecosystem, how mobile app. And absolutely the same journey is happening in our industry and same for TCS, right? When we started a couple of years back, right? And if I say AI, in AI, we are doing research from 20 years, but real 3 years or 4 years is the fact where we started that. But when we realized 2 years back, just investing into AI is not enough. Digital reskilling is not enough. We need to work on the whole ecosystem, right? What you call the product life cycle, right? And that is what was a change management challenge, right? Which we try to address that. But if I look from the pharma or a healthcare ecosystem, what Nick also mentioned, right? The whole challenge of this regulatory, even if I look from a regulator's perspective, whether it's a FDA or in EU, the technology is changing so fast, right? They need to cope up with that, right? And nobody knows that it is just not, say, digital therapeutic, right? But what is the ecosystem? As Nick was mentioning, there are legal issues, there is a transparency issue, there are ethical issues in terms of the fairness, transparency, right? So it's a combination of that. So we believe that there are software aspect of the issue, one category, which is like a change management, industry need to adopt. The good part is now you don't need to convince any organization that adopt AI, right? The second aspect is, but how you do that in a controlled manner, so to mitigate the risk, right? Being compliant, being in a pharma or healthcare, it become more conscious, right? How and what you do, right? So it's a combination of these factors, but I think the good sign, what I see, there is a movement. Yeah, there's a slow movement, but there's a movement in that direction. And I see there is a great opportunity, given the constraint and the challenges we have, right, to transform this healthcare ecosystem.
Great, very good. And I think, you know, from a Pfizer's perspective, you know, some of the challenges that we're seeing too is a lot of times, I think we have a very solid case for a machine learning solution, but maybe not the robust data that's required that we need to start to acquire or start to cleanse. And that takes some time, right? So there's been situations where we clearly have a strong business case to apply a machine learning, build a model, but it then takes time, right? And it's also something that we need. It's a different way in terms of which we deliver. It's not build it once and then you've delivered and go away. It's training. It's continue to train and feed that model so that model gets more, you know, builds up from an accuracy standpoint. It becomes more intelligent, right? And so you know, we've seen that as we'd have to kind of, you know, when it comes to delivering a solution, is making sure that our clients are vested for the longer term, right? It's not a launch, get the win, move on to the next thing, but it's how do you make sure that you've got the right support system in place to continue to care and feed for that model to provide even more value.
John,
Yeah,
if I can
yes.
add to that, right? The fundamental shift, right, from an IT perspective, which has happened, right? The way we think through it, developing a software, right? When we do a software, whether it's a GXP, non-GXP, we say, okay, done it, user testing, deploy. Other than business as usual, you forget it. In the AI, you can't do that, right? It is like, it's a human being. As you teach human, right? And the data is changing, context is changing, right? Whether it is taking the same decision what it used to, it's a big challenge. The new auditability, new controls, right? When your model become obsolete, right? Is a thing you have to have. You have a new operating model of data governance where you need data scientists, right? So it is not just one enablement of a software, and you rightly pointed out data and other big challenges. But what I'm saying is, even if you deploy something, there is a whole ecosystem post that deployment which you need to take care of, which I think a lot of players in the industry are still not able to comprehend in a very big manner, and which requires a change in the way the organizations, right, are structured in-house, right, from a data governance, even audit procedures, controls will change, right, in the whole ecosystem.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, I'm going to move us on to our next question, and back to Conrad. And so the question is, yeah, how is Penn sourcing talent to deliver these AI solutions? Are you looking to your students? I'm curious to what extent students are playing a role when it comes to delivering these solutions across the enterprise. You're looking to external partners. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, UPenn, of course, trains a lot of students, so therefore we have like a very natural stream of people coming in. I think there's a bit of a cultural issue, though. No, like a lot of people come through, say, a computer science background where they learn data science and they know all the algorithms, but then they lack the domain expertise. So when it comes to, say, applications to healthcare, the chain of the supply chain for like well-trained people is even difficult at a place like UPenn, I would say, and that's in part just because you need that specialist training where you really understand healthcare, where you really understand the application, but you also need to have all that skills about software development and machine learning and all those backgrounds. And I think there's very few people that have both, and I think we need to build training programs that draw from both sides. And I don't think we have done the perfect job of that yet, but I hope that we will in the future work with various partners to produce that chain where you can say, we'd want people that come maybe from a solid computer science background, but we need them to understand the application domain. And because I think that is required to really also train people both for our internal purposes, but also for training people for companies like you guys to really make them useful.
I'll definitely talk about how big of it. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I just want to piggyback on Conrad's point there. The successes that I've seen in this space are where we have really talented business analysts that can step in and translate language from a business context to a data scientist, or data scientists that are incredible in their soft skills and are able to kind of get above the data set, get above the algorithm, and really sit down and deeply understand what the business is trying to do and why, and what that ecosystem is, right? That gap is a huge gap. And the challenge that gap is driving is, to some degree, I don't want to call it overhiring, but it is overspending in the data scientist skill set and underspending in the business analyst skill set. And you continue to have businesses that struggle, right? Like, where are we applying AI? Let's go apply AI here. Let's go apply it there. And so I think, Conrad hit the nail on the head of having robust internal training programs where you're bridging that gap together. And when you find these needles in the haystack of folks that can do both, go put them on your biggest, toughest problems, right? Don't put them in the corner on a smaller challenge, right? Go pull those folks out and really have them start to focus on the biggest challenges.
And I should briefly mention there's a relatively new data analytics program of Wharton, which is really trying to bring business understanding together with data science skills. So UPenn is of course trying to bring those two sides together.
Excellent. And then on to Sanjeev.
Yeah, so John, what's the question? I just missed
the question in terms of, from a sourcing talent. So how is TCS going about, do you have your own internal, training programs, and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so fundamentally, it's our very organic development, right, for talent. I think one fundamental shift, again, what Konrad mentioned, here the issue is not on technology and the concepts of AI. I think that's the easy part. For a success of any program, right, the aspect of data science, modeling, and the domain knowledge, which is a very different way of working, right? It is not a typical initiative where you lay down in a Word document the requirement and somebody do and code it, right, and see whether it meets the specification. Here, the modeling aspect of it, the data science aspect of it, and the domain, the marrying three. And when we look into a talent management, we have a concept called T factor, right, which is not just binary state that whether you know one subject or not. We created T, like a English word corrected T. How much of breadth and the depth, right? For the AI, we look into whether you understand technology dimension, whether you understand data science, whether you understand the domain context, and what is the composition of the team, and then look at the competency and talent in that three-dimension view, which is very critical for the success of AI, not like any traditional training or a competency management. That's the one shift which we, in fact, if I just look my numbers, right, of last 2 years, we have trained a huge number of 300,000 people in digital technology. Out of that, maybe 100,000 people are in AI, machine learning, deep learning, image analytics, and the relevant area, which is a huge number. But I think just to answer your question, it's all organic training, right, which we are trying to address through, again, leveraging digital technologies.
Excellent. Okay, I know we have a couple minutes. We're going to turn then to the audience. And I think the last question I want to ask, Nick, I think you touched on it already in terms of the ethical challenges. Maybe Konrad, if you can talk about, are there ethical challenges you're also trying to combat that you're dealing with from an AI standpoint at University of Penn? Can you touch on those?
Yeah, so there's a wonderful research program by Aaron Roth and Michael Kantz. They in fact wrote a great book that I can highly recommend, which is called The Ethical Algorithm. And they teach a very nice course on this as well. So there's a lot of interesting developments. Now we can have differential privacy algorithms, which means you can use my data, but you can still under no circumstances really say anything about me, which is wonderful. No? Like it's really using technology to make some of the ethical risks go away. But then there's other questions. Now, what does it mean for an algorithm to be fair? It's very difficult. Now, like, what does it mean? Does it mean same outcomes? Well, that's not cutting it. But like, does it mean the system is the same? Well, no, like we are in a world with like systematic prompts, and therefore we can't just say we treat everyone exactly the same way and that is fair. And I think the more that machine learning gets to be part of real business, we need to worry about this, because the world, that's at some level the difficult aspect. If a person has biases, it's very difficult to prove that to someone. No, like I will never get enough data about them. But if a machine learning algorithm you roll out has biases, oh yes, people can and will exploit, will show that there's a bias. So all of a sudden, we really need to solve those problems. And UPenn is certainly doing a lot of interesting research in that area.
Excellent. Thanks for the response, Konrad. We have 15 minutes left. We're going to go to our, we have a bunch of questions that came in from the audience. I think, Nick, you're going to tackle the first one here. And the question is, how is a patient and physician trust built when using AI solutions? Do patients exhibit the same level of confidence as they did in traditional methods of diagnosis and treatment?
Yeah, Matt, it's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking it. It's a real passion area for me. One, from a pharma perspective, and then two, as a patient myself, right? When I go to see my doctor, the last thing that I want is for the doctor's head to be buried in his laptop or the iPad, asking me rote questions that I've answered 4 times. I filled that in a form in the waiting lab. I did it on the computer before I came in. And then we get 30 seconds of sort of measurement and a bit of a conversation, right? One, AI needs to be applied, particularly by healthcare companies, right? And those that are in the healthcare domain, to improve the interaction between the healthcare providers and the patients, right? So wherever we can, as entities operating in the healthcare ecosystem, return time back to that patient-doctor interaction, we've won, right? We have improved the outcome for that patient because the doctor is spending more time hearing the patient, understanding the patient's identifying more with their healthcare provider. And Conrad can certainly speak to some of this, they're likely going to take the doctor's advice more after having that eye-to-eye contact and that personal connection, versus there'll be some printouts for you waiting at the desk on the way out. I've written your prescription, right? That's what we're trying to avoid. And to a certain degree, we've almost over-engineered in the EMR space all of this data and all of these fields that need to be filled out. And there are more intelligent ways of understanding what needs to go into that EMR record than the way it's being done today. Additional to that, I think understanding the patient's ecosystem as well, and understanding more about their lifestyle in a more natural manner will help to improve the outcomes, right? And those are places where AI, well-placed algorithms, bringing data sets together in a way that have not been done before can really have an impact, but returning power to that patient healthcare provider conversation.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Follow-up question from Matt. Do you expect, this is our Skynet question, do you expect AI to mature to a level where humans will be replaced? If so, in what areas do you think that will happen and will be in the near term? Conrad, do you want to start?
Yeah, so that's a question that I thought a lot about and that I feel strongly about. So the first one is humans are being replaced. No? Like the main value proposition of AI, if we are honest about it, has been replacing humans. I mean, like it's brutal to say it like that, but like that's most of what we've been doing. Now, where are humans being replaced? Humans are being replaced in areas where there's few edge cases. No, basically, if a human does very similar things, and we know AI is, machine learning is really good at interpolating. It works beautiful in areas where there's few edge cases. It works really poorly in cases where everyday new problems come in that have never been there before. I should mention the other side of that goes one step further, which is there are people who work towards AGI. They want to build algorithms that are intelligent in the same way as humans are intelligent. People often feel that we are very close to that. I think this is a complete illusion. So you have GPT-3, for example, it writes text that looks like human text, but it's totally interpolating. It's not extrapolating. I can ask you to write text about stuff that you've never seen. GPT-3 has basically been trained on all the text ever written by human beings, and therefore it solves the problems, not by understanding what the text means, but by just basically in the right space interpolating. So I don't think we've had a lot of evidence of AI actually being intelligent. So maybe we will all feel relieved that the chance that let's say computer science executives will be obsoleted very soon is very small, because what we mostly deal with the edge cases. No, that's where all our work goes to, and so like drivers in a way, like there's lots of people driving in reasonably similar situations. So that's why it can largely be solved by interpolation on a big data set, but that doesn't really make it intelligent. It's just a big lookup table if we're mean to it.
Sanjeev or Nick, do you want anything to add, or I can move to the next?
Yes, certainly, John. I think as business leaders, it's important to find out where we have examples of limited edge cases to apply these types of capabilities to, right? Freeing up people's time to go focus on those edge cases is where the value is, right? And so there are many examples that we can cite where I had a problem with my Wi-Fi and I'm calling up my Wi-Fi provider, my cable provider, and I'm talking to a computer, right? That conversation 5 years ago, I was talking to a human, and they've limited the edge cases enough to know there's only a certain number of things that can go wrong that they can control, and those jobs have now been reallocated. I think what's really important is that we focus on opportunities where that talent has been spending their time to evolve and develop the talent, right? And I'm sure Sanjeev can comment on this as well, but the skill sets are being more and more differentiated. And as those skill sets are being more and more differentiated, I think we all have an ethical obligation to make sure that we're providing the right training to advance those people, because the people aren't going to go away, right? Yeah. What we do have to do is we have to find the right opportunities for these folks to continue to advance their careers and their impact.
And John, just to complement what Nick mentioned, right? So my brief answer is we need to be candid. Humans are getting replaced. And it's a very difficult question. And that's what the whole world is debating about, right? Is where and what will happen, right? So fundamentally, very important dimension will also come a balance between capability, opportunity, and what we call the ethical aspect of AI, right? Where is the debate is happening. But if you look from a healthcare perspective, to me, the very important aspect is the clinical decision, right? We have to see from a opportunity and a positive dimension, not replacing physician, not replacing surgeon, not replacing the lab technicians, how we can empower them, right? With the insight of clinical thing, which was not humanly possible, right? Without an AI, right? Still done by them, but is what I call it assisted, right? What you shared, John, about Pfizer, right? You have this strategy of digital companion. So I will call it, if we are able to spend more on augmenting, in some cases probably replacing, but augmenting humans with the great power of insight and creating a digital companion, right? And especially in the healthcare where you are dealing with the life of the patient, I think that should be the focus, right, for us.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the term I use, we should look at how do we look to supercharge our workforce, like leveraging these capabilities, but also, yeah, there are opportunities where it's within, they're not edge cases that we're looking to deploy automations and intelligent automations, right, to be able to address some of our biggest business challenges where there's opportunities to automate and therefore move those colleagues to higher value add activities, right? So that's a core part of our strategy. Are there different industries? Are there opportunities where AI will replace, machines will replace humans? I think absolutely we'll see that, right? Within this next decade in terms of smart driving cars and transportation, right? So, is it going to completely replace all jobs? I don't think so in that sector, but I think there's going to be opportunities where it is going to have a significant impact. So next question from Asha Aravind. There's a few questions here. I think I'm going to move to the COVID one, since we're in the midst of a global pandemic. A couple questions on how AI can be used for epidemic prediction, such as COVID-19 in the future, and taking preventative measures before a substantial spread. Anyone on the panel wish to take that?
Yeah. So John, absolutely, and COVID is like I call it as a paradigm shift, right? Not only knowing what is possibility, the urgency of that possibility, what is required. And that's where AI and digital technology, right, you come to a rescue. Now, if I look into the whole continuum, right, if for any epidemic, including COVID-19, first is detection, right? How you can early detect, right? So you have a control mechanism. Even if you've detected COVID, the technology, including AI, has played even in the role in the last 5 months to detect patterns, to identify which are the right way you can do a supply chain management, right? How you take a demand and supply, and we have done ourselves, right? For various government agencies also, they have struggled to see that in such a short notice, how you manage unprecedented demand and supply. Then you look into even the diagnostic. We spoke about some examples, right? How the AI act as one of the strong technology to bring some of the diagnostic into the play, right? And now, which is interesting, even if the vaccine is there, now there's a preparation going on, and we are part of that. in large country, including the country like India, right? How you're going to manage the vaccine management program, right? Where you're talking about 1.3 billion people, right? So AI is acting as one of the very strong enabler to manage that a huge risk. Nobody has done it in past in such a short cycle. So what fundamental, I think my summary point is, these technology, whether it is digital and AI in specific, is going to play important role, right? Not in now. And the good part is the world realize, right, the importance of that. Now, not from efficiency perspective, but the value and the urgency perspective. And that you'll see in next 2 years, there'll be a very strong ecosystem in the healthcare whether it is a healthcare, government agencies, or the pharma or a medtech, going to invest a lot, right, into that, to leveraging this technology for the value generation, for whether it's a epidemic like COVID-19 or the bigger patient in view, right, from their patient safety and the health of the patient.
Yeah, the COVID-19 and the race for the cure is kind of near and dear to our heart here at Pfizer, in terms of how quickly we're trying to bring this vaccine to market in record time, and just seeing how we are leveraging AI. You know, one example is in helping to identify the trial sites, right? We're conducting a global clinical trial faster than I think than it has ever been done. So we need to be smart about what are the sites that we choose in order to test this vaccine and bring this vaccine to market in record time. So it's being leveraged today in terms of helping to expedite the delivery of this vaccine to market. And we've seen, I think, in some of the snippets from the articles, how AI is being leveraged to help with the prediction of the spread more broadly. And so I absolutely think, as we think about future potential pandemics or anything like that, you know, technology is going to play an even bigger role in helping to contain the spread of such a virus, right? So I think it's absolutely going to play an even bigger role in our future. I know we are at time, so I think I want to thank all of our panelists for your time this morning. Thank everybody for the questions. And again, I hope next year we'll be back in person at our Pact. I really enjoy these Pact forums. But with that, I'll turn it back to Danielle.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone. Thank you, Sanjeev, Nick, Conrad, and John for joining us today and for a really interesting conversation around this topic. We'll have a topic on AI, machine learning, and ethical data in sort of the larger context beyond healthcare at our forum keynote series, the third actual session on our forum keynote series, which is October 14th. So I just want to tease those upcoming forum programs. We'll be presenting you 1 hour of live content on October 7th at 10 a.m., October 7th at 2 p.m., and October 14th at 10 a.m. It includes sessions on ubiquitous connectivity, data privacy. We will have a keynote presentation from Tony Saldana, who is the author of a book called Why Digital Transformations Fail. Everybody who signs up and fills out the form will get a copy of that book. So be sure to make sure you're registered for Forum and you do fill out that form. We'll also have a closing keynote on building the diverse tech workforce of the future. Really interesting conversation among some leaders from SAP, Google, and the National Diversity Council on sort of what does the tech workforce look like in the next 20 years. And we'll also hear from our forum demo pit. We have 8 companies that are super excited to pitch to everyone throughout the forum series. So remember, you can stay connected to Forum, you can access all of our past content, you can network with each other, network with our speakers, reach out to our speakers today, watch this panel recording, watch past panel recordings, all through our Forum mobile app and desktop platform. Use the QR code there to access it, or just reach out to me. And I'd just like to wrap up by saying thank you again to Pfizer for your sponsorship of this panel, for your thought leadership around this particular issue. And of course, thank you to our presenting sponsors for Forum and Nexanet and Fairmount Partners. Everyone have a great day, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.